if I told you that one of the best builds in Destiny in 2025 is actually Void Hunter with Graviton Forfeit, or is going to be Void Hunter with Graviton Forfeit, you'd probably give me a funny look, but it's true. In the recent blog post, Bungie announced several buffs to Void Hunter supers and a couple Void Hunter exotics that are a great step forward in revitalizing the class. And further to that, Void Hunter, specifically on Orpheus rig and Moebius Quiver, might actually become the DPS meta. And to give you a teaser of why that is, here's a fun trick that you probably didn't know worked. This is Hezen Vengeance with the Time Lost Magazine origin trait, which reloads the weapon when you are using your super. So just take a look here. You go rocket, melee grenade, super, rocket, rocket, super, rocket, rocket, super, 2 more rockets. I can finish up the rest with an envious reload. And I've just depleted all of my rockets in like the space of 15 seconds, which is pretty bloody good for DPS. So yeah, that's cool, but so are the rest of the changes coming. So let's first talk about those. So in the recent armor blog post, Bungie are buffing Graviton Forfeit so that it now grants improved grenade, melee, and class ability recharge rates for a moderate duration each time you become invisible. This effect will stack up to 3 times and it will not deplete while you are invisible. And then it says at 3 stacks of the buff, successive triggers additionally grant a portion of Void Overshield, which is going to give you really good survivability and really good ability spam at the same time. This sounds like a very promising rework. After that, they are also buffing Omnioculus to make it so granting the effects of Beyond the Veil to allies now also starts their health and shield regen. So nothing too crazy. To me, the one that stands out the most is definitely Graviton Forfeit, which is going to be the centerpiece of today's build. After that, in the recent abilities blog post, they have made several changes to the Hunter Shadowshot supers, specifically both the Deadfall and Moebius Quiver variants. To start with, the Deadfall variant is now having its weaken effect increased from 30% to 35%, which is pretty insane. It's actually the first in the game to ever be a 35% weaken. But more interestingly, at least to me, is the changes to Moebius Quiver. These changes state that while the super is active, dealing damage now increases the power of subsequent shadow shot attacks and bow weapons. And Bungie described this as a bar on the screen that charges as you deal damage, and when charged, your final shot, or final 2 shots if you're using Orpheus rig, because remember that gives you 3 shots total, deal significantly increased damage, turning it into, and I quote, one of the highest damage supers in the game, 227% max. They're also increasing the base duration of the super from 10 seconds to 16 seconds and 16 to 20 if you are using Orpheus rig, which is really cool hearing that one of the highest DPS supers in the game is going to be Moebius Quiver. Who would have thought in the big 2025? So that kind of goes back to the clip earlier of using the super to reload Hezen in a DPS context, because if you can imagine, that super is going to be dealing so much more damage now to bolster that little trick that I showed you. So today I wanted to bring you a build that you can take into the DLC on day 1 and just have a great time with. And heads up, this video was recorded before any artifact perks came out, so if there's any shown that'll enhance the build, then I'm going to update the pinned comment on which ones to go for, plus any useful interactions. So if you enjoyed today's content, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. So with the knowledge that Graviton Forfeit is essentially going to become both an ability spam and survivability tool with the Void Overshield that it's going to give you, here's how we're building the rest of our subclass to accommodate that. So for the super, as you probably guessed, we are going to be using the Moebius Quiver because this is getting a huge damage increase in Renegades, and it's just a very fun super to use in general. You have the cool tech from Hezen that I showed you earlier, and actually I did want to give you guys a good idea of how much more damage this super is actually going to be dealing. So let's just take a look at what it does now. So if I fire off all 3 arrows, this is with Orpheus rig by the way, all 3 arrows in quick succession, this is around 9,476 damage. So now, if I just get rid of the first set of arrows, then reset the number here, and then I shoot the second, this number is around 3,335, so that number is the one that's going to be multiplied by 227% in Renegades, and that's going to happen twice if you're using Orpheus. So if we actually do a little calculation, then I'll have these numbers on screen. The new number is actually going to be around 24,608, or 2.6 times stronger than it currently is, which is pretty insane. By the way, that is actually more than a Curus Thunder Crash, because a Curus Thunder Crash actually only hits for around 15,537. This is all at less than 100 super, by the way. So we are actually in a world where a Tether super is out damaging Thunder Crash, which is pretty crazy, and I cannot wait to actually use this. Yes, this is with Orpheus, and I know the build I showed you here actually uses Graviton, but what I'm thinking here is more of a running slash DPS loadout context, where you could have a loadout here, which is your running loadout, which is using Graviton Forfeit, then you swap to the second one, which has Orpheus for damage. Anyway, without getting too carried away, let's continue continue with the rest of our abilities. After the super, we are taking Gambler's Dodge to make it so when we dodge near enemies, it's going to give us a good portion of our melee back, which is going to be Snare Bomb. Unfortunately, no other Void Hunter melees to choose from at this current time. However, I hope that in Shadow and Order we do get some variants with Void Hunter melees, but that's a bit of cope. After that, we have Vortex Grenade. I just prefer this grenade the most on Void Hunter. Pretty good. You know, pulls enemies in. Very good for CC. For our first aspect of choice, we are taking On the Prowl. Now, this thing has a incredibly long-winded description, so it's better for me to just show you or remind you, if you haven't used this class in a while, what this actually does. But basically, going invisible, if I kill this target here, it will mark a target for me, visible here on my screen with this pink glow, and if it's kind of behind cover, it'll have that marker on it, as you can see there. And killing this target will actually give me a decent chunk of ability energy, as you can see there in the bottom hand corner, and that is basically it. Going back into invisibility will mark a target again, so if I just get rid of my dodge here, get rid of my melee and my grenade, take a look at my abilities bar again, kill this guy, it's going to give me a decent chunk of all of my abilities back, which is pretty cool. Basically just your ability spam aspect for Hunter. It also gives you 3 fragment slots. Furthermore, defeating this target will create a cloud of weakening smoke that when you step into makes you invisible again, and you can continue the loop essentially. So it's very good, very solid for Void Hunter. You basically are throwing if you're not using this aspect when playing Void Hunter. For the second aspect, we have Stylish Executioner, which is just your classic way of becoming invisible on Void Hunter, just another means of doing so. Defeating a weakened, suppressed, or volatile target grants invisibility and true sight. You basically don't need to use any of the other aspects because these two exist. Trapper's Ambush, not terribly useful. Vanishing Step, kind of been outclassed ever since Stylish Executioner came out. So yeah, Stylish and On the Prowl for your aspects. Now for the fragments, let's quickly go through these. The first one we have is Echo of Cessation. This will make it so finisher final blows create a burst of void damage that causes nearby combatants to become volatile. Defeating volatile targets creates a void breach. Now that's going to become important for our second fragment because it states that picking up a void breach or an orb of power grants Devour. This is Echo of Starvation, your classic way of getting Devour on void classes that are not Void Warlock. After that, for the third fragment, we have Echo of Vigilance. This is going to make it so defeating a target while your shields are depleted grants you a temporary Void Overshield, which is just going to be a nice way of getting some Void Overshield, but depending on the strength of the Overshield from Graviton Forfeit, this fragment may not actually be terribly necessary. And furthermore, it is losing its -10 class penalty because that's also what Bungie stated in the previous article. However, like I said, depending on how strong the Overshield from Graviton Forfeit is, you could also swap this for Echo of Undermining to make it so your Void grenades weaken targets. This has a -20 grenade penalty currently, but in Renegades, this is being reduced to -10. So they are making it less harsh after God knows how many years. So this definitely didn't need to be -20 anymore. So good change there from Bungie. For the fourth fragment, we have Echo of Instability, which will make it so defeating targets with grenades grants volatile rounds to your Void weapons, which we will talk about in just a moment. Then finally, we have Echo of Persistence to make it so Void buffs applied to you, like Invisibility, Overshield, and Devour, have increased duration. This actually makes Devour a maximum 15-second buff, and your invisibility, I believe, around 10 seconds if you factor in the bonus that Graviton Forfeit also gives you. So that about does it for the subclass. Now let's talk stats, and it's here that because we're on a Void Hunter, you know, your abilities aren't actually hitting that hard. So my philosophy with classes that have abilities that are purely just for utility and debuffing and crowd control, like with Void Hunter, your stat priority should mostly be into weapons, because that means that whatever special weapon you are running, like Mint Retrograde for example, or the brand new Arc Rocket Pulse, which was revealed to us yesterday, you can basically have infinite ammo on that thing because you are making enhanced bricks with high weapon stats. So that would be my recommendation to you. Try to get at least 150 weapons, then you can make up a little bit more if you run a weapons font on your boots, which we will go over later in the mods section. So for my stats, I have a lot of weapons, and the rest are purely allocated with respect to getting decent cooldowns. So that's why I have 70 class, 70 grenade, and 70 melee, which is pretty good, you know, as for like a solid baseline to just get all of your abilities back at a decent rate, because, you know, we don't need to boost them past 100. Those effects aren't really that important on Void Hunter specifically. I have also padded out some of my stats using font mods. As you saw, I have a weapons font on my boots. On my class, I have a class font, which puts me up to 90. Then on the helmet, I have a super font, which puts me up to around 100. However, these stats aren't amazing because my Hunter armor is not the best. Going to be farming a lot between now and Renegades, that's for sure, because Hunters are looking to be very solid. But if you are a hunter main and you have better armor than I can, you can probably make it look a little bit better than this, but this is just what I have at the time being. In terms of the armor that I have to make these stats, this is actually the collection roll Graviton Forfeit, which happens to be a good fit for my build. Then I have a gunner with a tertiary stat in melee, then a specialist with a tertiary stat in super, a gunner with a tertiary stat in class, then a paragon with a tertiary stat in weapons. Now, as far as the weapons for the build are concerned, it is basically just your choice of void weapon plus a strong special weapon, and that special weapon can be a void weapon. In some of the gameplay you are seeing, I have done a mixture of what is Lotus Eater and also Mint Retrograde, kind of mixing it around. I like Lotus Eater. If there was a void rocket pulse that existed in this game, I would be using that all day, but unfortunately at the moment all we have is Mint Retrograde and soon to be this new arc pulse that was revealed to us yesterday. So yeah, basically just take a void weapon so that you can get the benefit of volatile rounds from your subclass, something strong like Graviton Lance, very solid primary weapon here, and then Mint Retrograde, obviously it's a rocket pulse, it's very strong, it's still going to be doing the same damage even in Renegades, even with the ammo nerf, it's just going to be still very powerful. But you could also just go for something like a Lotus Eater and then maybe Osteostriga. This is getting a buff after all. They are making it so the poison burst has had its cooldown reduced by 2 seconds, which is pretty nice. Not quite back to its original form, but it is a step in the right direction. And Lotus Eater is just a very solid sidearm with very solid rolls. You have shoot to loot destabilizing rounds. You also have repulsor brace destabilizing rounds. It is an old weapon though, so if you don't have this, I totally understand. You could just then go for Mint and Graviton like I did in some of the gameplay you are seeing. Now, as for artifact perks, like I said at the beginning, this video has been recorded before we actually knew what they were, before they were revealed to us in the TWID, so I will have the pinned comment updated based on recommendations. However, in terms of what we could see, there are some older artifact perks that are void that would fit very nicely, such as Maligned Harvest from Heresy, which makes it so volatile procs prime your next source of void damage to create a weakening burst. There's also Volatile Marksman from Heresy, where rapid void weapon precision hits or kills grant volatile rounds, which is pretty cool. It means that you don't need to run the volatile rounds fragment. After that, we have Volatile Flow, all the way back from the Witch Queen season, where collecting an Orb of Power grants volatile rounds. And then finally, we could have something like Limit Break from Heresy, where casting your super while critical health or under a matching elemental effect grants 30% increased super damage, which would be pretty massive, especially for the changes coming to Moebius Quiver. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for any void related artifact perks coming next season, if that is the case. Now, as for the actual armor sets that you could go for, mine is just the full ion adapter here, the 2-piece and the 4-piece. The 2-piece is mainly just the one you should worry about though, because that will make it so when you get kills with a rocket pulse or any micro missile weapon, it's going to give you a 20% splash damage reduction, which is pretty nice. There aren't any other armor set bonuses that are particularly relevant to any void builds at the moment, so ion adapter is just your cookie cutter. It's just, you know, standard, very good to have on most builds at the moment. So let's wrap things up with the armor mods. Starting with the helmet, we are going with 1 special ammo finder to increase the rate at which we spawn special ammo for whatever weapon we are choosing to spam with our high weapon stat, then 1 super font to pad our stats up to 100, then 1 void siphon to make it so getting kills with our void weapons makes us orbs. For the gloves, we have 1 copy of firepower, a void loader, then impact induction. The chest piece is just general resist mods like usual. Then on the boots, we have stacks on stacks so that when we collect an orb, it gives us 2 copies of armor charge, then 1 weapon font to get us even more weapons to increase the chance of our bricks being double-sized even more. Then finally, I have a scavenger for whatever special weapon it is I'm running. In this case, it is Strand Scavenger for Mint Retrograde. Then lastly, on the class item, we have time dilation to improve the length of our fonts, a class font to give us even more class stat, and powerful attraction. Now, as far as the optimal gameplay loop is concerned for this build, your aim should just be to spam your abilities as often as you can. Start with the smoke to get the weakening chain going, which is going to trigger Stylish Executioner, and then get your initial on the prowl on the go, which then will basically chain infinitely as long as there are enemies to kill. Remember that in Renegades, Graviton Forfeit is going to be a lot stronger. It is also going to give you consistent Void Overshield and much faster cooldowns, but we'll actually have to wait and see for that. But I'm sure that it's going to be very substantial, so very much looking forward to those changes. Quickly before I go, here's the fashion for the build. If you wanted to check for yourself, it is just the classic super black hunter, because obviously Graviton is just like that. You got to work around it. Looks very nice in my opinion, but it is very basic. As always, the dim link for this build will be in the description, and I hope you enjoyed watching today's video, and I hope you think about taking this build into the campaign, because I promise you it is going to be very solid. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.